Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. So we go least favorite to best pick of the week, and everything in between. Before we get started, of course, at the end of the video, I do the viewer's pick of the week, so in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured in the video. Now, also this coming Monday, I have a Kickstarter for my comic, Like Father, Like Daughter, and a crossover between The Haunting. Like Father, Like Daughter is about a high school girl. Father left her to become a full-time superhero. Everyone in the world loves him, except for her, and then she inherits his abilities. Haunting is about a young boy who has ghosts following him, and he does not want any of the responsibility. They collide at a Halloween dance at Casey's school, which is the high school girl, and chaos ensues with zombies and ghosts, and it's a lot of fun, so hopefully you guys could go check that out, and follow the page, because you can actually check out the pre-launch page, so we have early bird specials and get a chance to jump onto those. But going into the review. So this week I had 11 books, pretty average size haul for me. And number 11 for me this week was The Immortal Hulk Time of Monsters issue 1. And, I was looking forward to this book just because of the way it was promoted. It's supposed to be like the original Hulk appears. But honestly, the dialogue didn't really do it for me. It was all pretty much based in BC, and I just couldn't really get into the character. I actually like the secondary story a bit more. We get to see like the Hulk in a monster movie audience, and chaos ensues there. So I enjoyed that. I thought the artwork was good for that story as well, the secondary story. The first story, it's very muddy and really tries to go into the nitty-gritty of the main premise of this story, and yeah, it just wasn't really for me. I will be sticking with the Immortal Hulk instead, which we only have 3 issues for. I wonder if this will actually pick up any threads anywhere. I'm not really sure. So overall, I'm giving that 2 stars, and that is number 11. Moving on to number 10. This was in my top 5 last week, went back to the bottom, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 66, kind of playing off of the same things I haven't really been liking about this series that I thought the last issue had improved on. So it's very spread thin. We have the whole Robbie situation with his son and in the Beetle. We have a little bit of Kindred. We actually get a reveal with that. We get some ramifications of Boomerang. Kingpin's thrown in there, Mary Jane's thrown in there, Overdrive's thrown in there, Carly Cooper's thrown in there, Betty Branch is thrown in there. This is a regular sized comic, and there are so many stories that they try to fit in here with very little Spider-Man. And also trying to continue in the threads of the previous giant size annual book that they did last week. So I was disappointed with that. I liked how fluid the previous issue was, so that was definitely disappointing. And all the threads, because they had such little time, they didn't really move that much, even if some were interesting but kind of coming from left field, and also kind of predictable, because the ending of this issue, we get to see another version of Harry Osborn, it seems like. I'm like, okay, we kind of knew that, right? Obviously they didn't really spell it out, but that was one of the guesses, was that Kindred wasn't actually Harry, it's Harry from another universe or whatever, and the real Harry is somewhere else. And that's kind of what happened here. We don't know the details about it, but that's what kind of happens in the end of this issue. And then Betty's pregnant, and she kind of shows up. I'm like, okay, what's that gonna do with anything? That's just another soap opera a line that we need to follow, and there's so many of them already. So I don't know how to feel. Obviously Betty was a character for Venom for Flash Thompson, so is that gonna have to do with any of the Carnage Venom stuff that's happening? I don't know what her role is gonna be here. So overall, was definitely a little disappointed with this issue, even though, I guess the ending gave you something to think about, even though I don't know if I really enjoyed what the ending was. So overall, I'm giving that 2.5 stars. Artwork, okay. It's just an overall kind of forgettable issue. Moving on to number 9 already, and that is Fantastic Four Life Story, the 60s, issue 1. Seems like Marvel's given some love to the Fantastic Four this year with some major plot lines in its main series, and then we have obviously this life story idea. We have Kang, who's getting his own book soon. there's a lot of Fantastic Four to be had. The 80th anniversary is coming out. And this is okay. You know, I really liked Spider-Man Life Story, but also that took a couple of issues to pick up, so I'm willing to see how this will pick up. It's very much a setup of, okay, how is this world a little different, trying to really embrace the political atmosphere of the 60s, which was cool. But some of the friendship and some of the family ties weren't as strong here, like Johnny being a bit younger than he is in the comics and a little bit more of a Boy Scout. We do have Ben and Reed not being friends originally, so that kind of takes away from some more of the family aspect. But that really is what the whole book's about, is that they're kind of separating a little bit and doing their own thing. I do feel like there's a lot of plot points that were rushed because they're trying to fit so much, because it's a whole decade. So I kind of wish we slowed down and got into this version of the characters, but I do think there was a lot of potential. The artwork is really solid for the book. I love the concept of how these characters change throughout the decades and doing little fun what if stories with them, and I like that idea, and I'm curious to see where that's going to go for the other decades. But the 60s had a little bit of a shaky start for me, so overall I'm giving that 3 stars. Not a bad issue, but I definitely hope it picks up like Life Story Spider-Man did with its second issue. Moving on to number 8, which is Power Rangers issue 7. And this was a really fun issue. Definitely delved into a little bit more of the heavy sci-fi aspects, but the things I really enjoyed was the character beats and some of the potential storylines that are going to happen here. I really was interested in this kind of forming kind of friendship between Lord Draken and the rest of the team, minus Trini, and kind of the tension between the team because of it. So I really enjoyed that aspect and just how that throws everything into a loop. And then the idea that they're going to find a new Blue Ranger and who is that person going to be. So I enjoyed the more soap opera elements of this issue than the heavy sci-fi going to another planet aspect. The artwork sometimes feels a little crowded at times too, and obviously this is a kind of heavy dialogue book, so I kind of wish that some of the artwork breathed a little bit more. But overall, this was a fun issue, and it's cool to see that Power Rangers is delivering something completely different than Mighty Morphin, and you get two very different vibes of, you know, heavy sci-fi here and then more of the high school superhero aspect in the other series, and different elements that you might have enjoyed from the television show, because Power Rangers has delved into space and sci-fi stuff in the past. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on, I'm sorry, that was number 8. So moving on to number 7. And that is the Mighty Valkyries issue 2. I was going to say the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. But this was, there's parts I really enjoyed about this issue. Like the dialogue work between the villain and Jane, I really enjoyed. And I always enjoy when they tackle Jane's humanity and who she is and her you know, her right foot in Asgard and her left foot on Earth, and they definitely play with that pretty well here with some of the dialogue. I do feel like they're trying to fit too much though. We have Kraven that gets involved in this issue rather quickly. The villain I'm still not totally sold on either, and then also you're trying to play with the new Valkyrie and what she's been up to. So I do think it's a little bit too much. But the artwork is so good for this book, so cinematic. And again, I enjoyed the more character-driven story with Jane, and I hope it does kind of find its balance as the series goes on. Because that's something that's been a little tough for this miniseries. But again, love Jane, and I love just seeing her again and getting new stories with her. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Daredevil issue 30. Another great issue of Daredevil, and I really like how it kind of moves like a television show. You know, it's interesting. It's like what Spider-Man's trying to do. There's so many different pieces they're trying to like bring together: an A storyline, a B storyline, and a C storyline. This one does a really cohesive, organic A, B, C storyline, and we get to see the Elektra story, Daredevil, and then Kingpin, and all are really good. Daredevil dealing with having a chance to get out of prison. He's like, no, I don't want to, but I'll help you. And it's just so Daredevil, so Matt Murdock. I should say Matt, because there's 2 Daredevils. And then Elektra dealing with being the new Daredevil, but also still being Elektra, and what that means for her mantle, and even this kid that's her protege. And there's a lot of darkness there, and I just enjoyed a lot of the more thematic ideas of identity, where she's like, I don't need a secret identity. I'm Elektra and I am Daredevil. Both identities is something you should fear. And how that darkness kind of seeps into her protege as her protege kills someone. And I think faints in the end. I don't know. That was kind of weird. But she faints and Elektra has to deal with, is this okay to teach this kid that, even though I went through similar things? And, all the culmination of Hell's Kitchen having a new Kingpin and Bullseye being released. There's a lot of great little pieces that make it really exciting. And I feel like it's kind of like building to a kind of season finale in some regards. So artwork was stronger in the Elektra story than the Matt Murdock story. I do feel like there was a little stiffness there, but there wasn't as much action in Matt Murdock's story, so I'd rather have had that artist than, switch it up with the Elektra artist, because there was a lot of great action, and I loved the nightclub scene. Just the coloring there was so good. So overall, really solid book. If you're not reading Daredevil, go check this one out. And honestly, just a couple issues ago was a really good jumping on point, because I jumped onto the book. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Stillwater, issue 7. So glad to see this book back. And man, this issue is a reminder of how good this book is, where we get to see the aftermath of the town hall burning down. And the mom explains this really well, where she's like, well, we all can't die. Violence is like slapping someone, stabbing someone's like slapping someone in the face. It doesn't really matter. It's like, oh, you did that, but it's not going to kill me because you can't die. But burning a building is a big no-no, because that's going to take them time to have to rebuild and money to have to rebuild. So that was really interesting. And obviously all fingers are pointed at them because they were trying to lead this charge, and it wasn't them. But this really interesting idea of the kid, the one who jumped off of the building and survived, that we saw in the first issue or maybe second issue, he has kind of this clubhouse with all the other kids who haven't grown up, and is kind of praising our main character because he's someone who was able to grow up and escape. So they kind of have their own little pocket of the town. And yeah, I thought that was super interesting. That was a cool ending. And there's just a lot of great pieces moved in this issue as tensions build within this town, and we learn more about this town. We learn more of its people. It was a really good issue. We also have some action in this issue as well. There's a sword fight in the middle. So I thought it was a really solid issue, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4. A new book I was super excited for, and it did not let me down, and that is Wonder Girl issue 1. One of the things I really liked from Future State, and there wasn't a ton that I liked from Future State, was Wonder Girl. And Yara's voice was so unique and so electrifying, and that's exactly what happens here, where we get to see a little bit of her past. We see that her mom had died because of her, and maybe she doesn't remember it, but she has lived a kind of normal life. It doesn't seem like she was even living on the Amazon's island in Brazil. It seems like she lived somewhere else. And now she's going back to Brazil, and this is turning a lot of heads. People don't know why it's turning heads, but they know something's shaking up within Themyscira, within the superhero community. And we get to see Wonder Girl in action, fighting to help somebody, and then she gets dragged into the water. So the mythology aspect's going to be pulled in very quickly. And overall, I thought this was a really solid introduction to the character. Her voice was still there. I love her spunk in general. The artwork was so good because the writer and artist is the same person, so it was very fluid, this issue. And overall, just a really good introduction to the character. Even if you didn't read any of the Future State stuff, it's very, very new reader friendly. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Radiant Black issue 4. And this had a cliffhanger, man. This had a cliffhanger. This changes a lot of things. So at first it was kind of a slow build where we get to see the best friend and our main character kind of talk about being a hero, what it means, what are you doing with these powers. They test out the powers a bit. It kind of leaned a little less on the writing aspect because that was last issue. But the big thing is that we get to see our main character and the villain. They fight it out, and it looks like our main character died. He's not breathing, and our best friend here takes his ability, kind of his wish in a way. He kind of wished he was the superhero because he knew everything about being superheroes. So what now? Does our main character die? Is there going to be 2 Radiant Blacks? Will he be a villain? Will he be a hero? It was a really interesting cliffhanger where you're like, oh, I really don't know what's going to happen next with this series. And there's a really good superhero action sequence in this issue as well. The artwork is so good, from just the talking heads to, again, the kind of more Power Rangers-esque fighting here. And it was a really solid issue, which makes me so excited for issue 5. It kind of has that rarity of nothing was spoiled, and you're like, oh, because there's nothing previously before this, there hasn't been 1,000 issues of Spider-Man or, 1,000 issues of Superman where you could kind of tell where the story's going to go. This is only 4 issues, and this is a new character, so you really just don't know where the story's going, and that's such a pleasure to read and something you don't get too much in comics. So I'm giving that 4 stars, and that was number 3, Radiant Black. Moving on to number 2, and that is Runaways issue 36. And this was an interesting issue. It was a little slower because you had to explain things. I would say the first part, there's times where I wish we were able to know more, because we have future Gert, and I guess it's this version of Gert because she seems to know things. I thought it was maybe like the previous version who died. So it's actually... it's so many Gerts and so much time travel, but it's this version of Gert, but from like when she's 21 years old and knows what happens next. And she can't tell Chase. We get little hints. Maybe it has to do with Molly. It definitely might have to do with Victor because she looks really sad at the end of the issue. So we get very small hints, but that goes on for a little while. And then the thing that brought this really up to number 2 was conversation between Victor and Gert. And really letting that all out. And the dialogue work is beautiful and so good. Where Victor talks about his time with the J Squad and how that affected the team and their relationship. And Gert feeling insecure of not having powers. And they really, really talk it out. And it's just such a beautiful conversation. And just seeing how much they care for each other and what it means for them to love each other. And it just was a really, really well done scene. And then, of course, we get to them face to face with other Gert and drama ensues there. And it's definitely I don't want to say a slower issue because I don't think it was slow, but it kind of took its time, and it was only 2 scenes this issue, and it looks like next issue is gonna really blow up, and it's a good build up to that. So overall, I thought it was a really solid issue. Again, the first part was a little slower, but I just thought that second part was so beautiful, and then obviously the cliffhanger blows your mind in so many ways. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 2. And also, of course, as always, artwork is so good. And this is a talking heads issue and still so entertaining. And the facial expressions are always top notch. So moving on to my pick of the week, my number 1 pick is Nightwing issue 80. And there's so much to love about this book. So we get some progression with the Heartless character. Nightwing and Heartless actually come face to face by the end of the issue. But it's the little Bat family moments I really enjoy here. The team up between Tim, the ongoing conversation between Barbara and Nightwing as well. And then him being up for investigation for a murder that he didn't do. How does he get out of this? And him trying to figure it out himself as Nightwing. And it just, the threads from previous issues really flow well here. The money from Alfred, the group text of how humiliating it is that Nightwing lost his wallet. It's just so many fun character beats here, while still progressing the plot in the story and making that intriguing. And the artwork is so good, so cinematic, and always has been. That you could just tell how great this creative team works together, and it's just so seamless. A great issue. Been loving Nightwing. Definitely my favorite DC book on stands right now, and I give that 4 stars, and that is my pick of the week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and of course, in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for this week, because we're doing the viewer's pick of the week. And from last week, that was The Joker, issue 3, and here are some comments about that. Thank you guys. Definitely follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter and They Call Her a Dancer. And every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is our comic book podcast where we talk about all things comics. So be sure to check that out as well. Thanks, guys. Bye.